Light and shadow are what make a portrait come alive, but they're also what I still struggle with the most. In this video, I'm working with really strong lighting, so the goal was to protect the brightest areas, build up the shadows without muddying them, and figure out where edges would stay soft or sharp. This piece definitely tested me, but in a good way. I will walk you through what I tried, what worked, and what I will keep in mind next time. Today we will be painting this portrait, and I was thinking for the past 2 days what kind of coloring do I want to use for this one. I'm going for simple 5 colors. So this is cadmium orange, cadmium red. This is our usual mix for skin tones with alizarin crimson, and we will be using blue violet. This granulates a little bit, but I'm going to mix it with this orange to create brown for the hair. And then I have Bloodstone Genuine color from Daniel Smith, which is very dark, deep granulating color that I'm going to also use for background stylization and some darker parts of the hair. This will be the essential part of our palette. You have to have your palette and all the tools you have to have ready, because when you start painting, then there's no time to look for supplies. The wash is drying quite quickly, and so always I spend so much time preparing and making sure that everything is here, even the dryer in case that I need. I have a sponge that I use for getting rid of some excess wetness from my brush, and I've got a bunch of brushes. Usually it's round brushes, different sizes. These two I don't use very frequently. I wanted to use them for larger washes today. This is my most frequently used Series 7 brush, and one that's a bit smaller with the tip. These are natural bristles. The basic skin tone usually is orange, and this is cad red. Usually this would be my skin tone base, but I'm adding alizarin crimson into the skin tone mixture, and I'm gonna work with this one, this type of flesh tone, a bit more. This is my base. It's gonna be very light. For the hair, I'll be mixing orange with a bit of blue violet to get a warm textured brown. I actually no longer keep any pre-mixed browns on my palette anymore. It's just so easy to mix on the spot, and I prefer the variety and subtle shifts that I get this way. If you're curious, by the way, about how I set up my palette for portraits, let me know. I haven't talked about that for a while on this channel, and it might be worth a dedicated video. As we start the first layer, the main focus is preserving the light. Try to keep your brush strokes soft and even, and most importantly, paint around the areas that need to stay completely white. These are usually the strongest highlights, like the tip of the nose, the cheekbones, or parts of the lips. In watercolor, once you lose the paper white, it's really hard to get it back, so just be extra mindful here. I always remind myself this layer is not about perfection, it's about placement. Even if the color feels too light now, that's exactly what we want to start. Now we're going to paint the hair, and we will be using the dry brush technique, which means basically this. You will try to paint along the texture of the paper and just have your brush a little bit drier and a bit scattered bristles than normally. You'll get this type of texture. I purposely go from the lightest parts of the hair, just follow the direction of the hair strands. Here there's a lot of light. Some areas of the hair will stay very soft and textured, but others will get more definition as we add more layers. If something feels too harsh, I tend to just soften it with clean water or eventually blend it into the background. Like you probably noticed, my backgrounds are big improvisation. I let the watercolor run, flow, and do its thing. But now that the wash is dry, it is time to shift gears.
When I start painting the light and shadow on her face, the technique needs to become much more intentional and controlled. This is where I slow down, pay close attention to form, and build things up carefully, one layer at a time.
We're going to mix color for shading, and that's red with cobalt blue. This is blue cobalt. So shadows, they always have bluer part and redder part. Like here, for instance, if you can see properly, this shadow is a very complicated one. And it gets darker and it gets a bit lighter at times, depending on how the face and the form turns away from the light source. But here you have clearly have more influence of the blue, so this cooler shadow, darker shadow. And here you've got more like the reddish one. So you have to look when you paint which part of your shadow is warmer, which is cooler. But we only use these two colors. So when you mix them, when you have more blue, you get this shadow. And then as you add more red, you get this shadow, but it's still the same mixture. It's just here prevails red, here prevails blue.
I'm starting the shading with a mixture of red and blue. It is still diluted, but definitely thicker than the first wash. I like to begin with larger areas first, like here on her forehead there's a large shadow, and focus on where the form begins to turn towards the light. When shadows transition softly into the light, I use a clean damp brush with no pigment to gently soften the edge. But it's important not to overload it with water or you can create blooms. I also keep an eye on whether the shadow kind of feels warmer or cooler, and then I adjust the mix slightly depending on the area. If you're just starting out with this technique, it can feel very overwhelming to balance all of that at once. I would advise you to just use one paint mixture and focus on laying down the wash and softening edges smoothly. And once you get more comfortable with that, you can add trying to shift your color from bluer to redder. This is why I love practicing monochromatic portraits from time to time. Working with just one color lets me focus purely on light, mid-tones and darks, and on the way that I lay down the wash. Once you add color into the mix, there's always the extra layer of complexity like temperature shifts. It's a beautiful challenge, but sometimes simplifying things helps you build confidence before layering it all together.
There, I just want to use and paint the upper lip just with very soft glaze of alizarin crimson. While we wait here, we can maybe do her eyes with a bit of green and just paint this part. While it's still wet, I still want to return with a bit thicker mixture and place in some shadows, because there's just tiny corners with just a bit shadows that are just a bit darker and I can't get them right because they keep on disappearing on me. I think this as a first layer is quite okay, but we have to get the details of the face right no matter what. I do not mind like these little blurs, but for me it's important to have the tonal values, to have the bluer and the redder part 90% right, and to have edges that are either soft like here or here and harsh like here when it's a cast shadow, because that's what's gonna give us the 3D effect. We're gonna have to shade around the eyes first before we can add the details of the pupil and everything, so let's do that.
I actually find painting details easier than working with large shadow areas. When I'm using a tiny brush, I have so much more control and I'm not dealing with a big watery wash that might misbehave. With details like this eye, it is really just about coloring small shapes and trying to match the midtones and darks you see in the reference. A few tips for making bright eyes pop. Keep the iris, the colorful part, lighter at the bottom. You can even lift out some pigment if it gets too dark. Adding more depth just below the upper lashes also helps create contrast. For the black pupil, I like to smudge the edges very slightly so it doesn't look so harsh and flat. And don't forget the little sliver of light under the iris. That's the eyelid thickness. Keeping that area clean and bright can really make the eye glow. If you lose too much light there, do not worry, I will show you a few tricks at the end of this video for how I bring it back.
So we'll continue with the eyebrows. So let's try to do this. I use this dry brush with split bristles, and I try to go with the direction of the eyebrows. So this, like, this way. This is very soft, and this way. I also want a blurred edge on this side. The other side, do this as well, very carefully. Bit of the lashes, just a hint, it does not show so much on the reference photo, and just a hint of the lashes as well on the other side.
It's very likely that your shadows won't match the reference perfectly after the first pass, and that is completely normal. If you're working on cotton paper, you can safely add more layers to adjust the tonal values or even shift the color without ruining your earlier washes. I usually do these corrections with a small brush, and if the painting really matters to me, I spend over an hour just looking for small mistakes and gently fixing them. Take your time, observe what might be slightly off and make thoughtful corrections, but try not to slip into perfectionist mode, because at some point it's okay to let the piece go even if it's not flawless. Cotton paper is very forgiving, but everything has its limits, and honestly, a bit of watercolor chaos can be kind of charming. With just a few brushstrokes and a darker brown mix, I add more depth to the hair, but I always try to keep this part loose and expressive, not detailed like the face. I really enjoy contrast, detailed features against flowing shapes, the coarse granulation of bloodstone genuine next to the soft, even skin tones, and of course the light against the dark. That balance is what gives the painting character.
Okay, so let's just add a few tiny bit adjustments. Now this is all about just tying the painting together. And yeah, my face turned out a bit different than the reference photo, but I still like it, it's mine.
I promised you a fix, and here it is. Even if you put down too much paint, it is actually possible to lift some of it from cotton paper and bring back subtle highlights. Here I'm using a stiff synthetic flat brush dampened with clean water to gently draw in hair strands. Then I lift that loosened pigment with a tissue. It's a simple trick but really effective for adding more depth and texture to the hair without painting more layers on top.
Lastly, I want to scratch out some of the highlights. I would start with the eyes that I want to lighten a tiny bit. Like, you can do it with white, like with gouache for example, but I rather want to use this bit more white. But most importantly, the hair.
The sound of scalpel against the paper is honestly kind of awful, but I still prefer using this method to create highlights before reaching for gouache. It feels a little less invasive, the results are softer, and it's a more traditional approach that really suits the watercolor medium. I do not use it everywhere, but for subtle touches it can add just the right amount of light.
One last thing, I have this new pearlescent watercolor. It's Cosmic Purple, and I still did not open it. It's brand new. This is Coliro, Finetech Coliro, so that's handmade watercolor that are metallic. I used to work with them a lot, but nowadays I don't use metallic anymore so much, very rarely. But today maybe this could use a little bit of splatters. So to work with this paint, you first have to activate it. And you activate it by putting water in it and let it sit like this for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then we mix it up and we make a thicker mixture from it that we can then create sparkles from. So let's do that. So it definitely is thick now. So we can get some of this paint and just sprinkle some of it here. Just like when working with regular watercolor, we have to get rid of excess water if there's too much. I don't think the impact will be so big, but it was at least fun to finally open that paint that I purchased months ago. Okay, now let's dry this, and I hope this one is final. And this is our final painting.
The full real-time process, including the downloadable sketch, reference photo and my commentary from start to finish, is available on my Patreon, so feel free to check it out if you'd like to paint along. And if you enjoyed this video, hitting the like button really helps support the channel and means a lot to me. I'm also working on a new portrait class for Skillshare that will focus on color and shading, so stay tuned for updates on that soon. And please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what topics you'd like me to cover in the future videos, or just say hi, don't be shy. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!